Hey everybody, welcome to the nabarcart. Super excited today to be chatting with Kelly from Yours. And I'll let you, Kelly, just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and why we're talking to each other today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Logan. Yep, I'm Kelly Bertog, and I, alongside with my wife, run Yours Non-Alcoholic Wine, and yeah, just super excited to be here today.
Yeah, awesome. I know you, Kelly, from a while ago in this space, but before you actually had a product,
hmm
right? So tell me about how you got into sort of non-alcoholic anything, and then obviously I'd love to talk about how you decided to make wine.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we definitely have like a pre-product and a post-product life of our of yours, I guess, and the the whole journey into non-alcoholic started. It was January of 2019, and my wife and I were actually in Barcelona. And it was a Thursday night, and we had bought tickets to go see the Barcelona soccer or football, as they would yell at me to call it. We went to their stadium to watch a match. Get there, find our seats, and at this point we had been enjoying like the Spanish wines every night and like just kind of doing our thing. We were traditional, I would say, or typical millennial drinkers, and you know, we enjoyed that evening glass. But we got to the stadium, took our seats, and then we did what we would normally do at any sporting event, which is, I got up and I was like, oh, I'll go grab a couple of beers, to watch the match. And so I go out into the concourse and I walk into like the main concession thing, and I'm in line, and finally I get to the front, and I see they only have one option, and it's cerveza sin alcohol. It was non-alcoholic beer, and their big beer in Barcelona, and I imagine much of Spain is Estrella, which I think is kind of their Budweiser. And they had Estrella 0.0, and I was like, that's kind of strange. And so I hopped out of line and walked to a different stand, and it was the same thing. They only had the non-alcoholic beer. And I come to find I in my broken Spanish was chatting with someone, and I guess at that stadium, and actually I think a lot of European stadiums, depending on the country and the league, they actually either only serve non-alcoholic beer, or that's the only thing they'll serve while the match is going on, and you can only get alcoholic beer during halftime and pregame. It's just like a way to kind of create a safer environment for fans. So I bought two non-alcoholic beers. I was like, well, I already waited in two different lines, might as well. But I did think it was a little strange, and brought them back to the seats. And I was telling Marina the story, and then the match started, and we started drinking our beers. And like halfway through the beer, I was like, this like experience of drinking a beer at a sporting event is exactly the same. Like I don't miss the alcohol at all. It was kind of mind blowing, and she said the same thing. We're like, what? Like we never really thought about it, because we were like, again, not that we would go crazy, but it's just like I guess to that point we assumed that like the alcohol was the experience, but then we're like, no, it's exactly the same. And actually, we got another round. We like enjoyed it so much, we got another round at halftime, and so that really opened our eyes. And then we woke up Friday morning, we're like, oh, we kind of feel great skipping the evening wine, and just doing these non-alcoholic beers. And we went on a hike the next morning, and so what we're just talking about, like, like maybe there's something to this. So
Uh,
we ended up learning that like Spain has a huge uh, um, kind of non-alcoholic scene already, and we actually traveled to Germany and the UK on that same trip, and both those places as well. Like every grocery store we went to, every bar, like there was non-alcoholic beers on tap and plenty of non-alcoholic wines, and so that was really what opened our eyes to the idea of like alcohol alternatives. And then when we came back to the States, at the time in 2019, as I'm sure you remember, like there was much fewer options available here than there are today. So, we started exploring what we could, and just kind of trying different recipes and different brands. And then, we would jot down our own notes and thoughts, just for ourselves. And then eventually we're like, well, why don't we share this with people? And so we launched the Yours website just as like a blog to start sharing recipes, and then created a social channel, and we really launched as more of like a community to just kind of share our own exploration of non-alcoholic beer, wine, and spirits. So yeah, that was kind of how we got started. It was really more of a community exploring the industry versus any sort of focus on a product.
yeah. we'll get to the product because one, we haven't talked about this before, but I actually really like it. So
Oh, good.
that's the first thing. I've tried it and I like it. No promise for like every episode of people have to listen to me say every product is good because it's not always true. Um,
hmm
but so we'll get to that. Um, so in like in the blog world, like what's your background? You and your wife's background, like what made you do that? Because I feel like a lot of people might have that experience. I mean, I'm similar, I guess, where it's like I tried some NA beer and I was like, now I have a podcast on it. That's not true for everyone. You know what I mean? So what kind of
Sure.
was the motivation for you to share and like start the community?
Yeah, that's a great question. So actually, my wife and I met, oh geez, at this point, we actually met like 12 or 13 years ago. We met well before, and we actually worked together before we ever started dating for years. And we both worked at an e-commerce company. So we're located in the Chicagoland area, and there's a company here that does online sales of like outdoor equipment, like hunting, camping, hiking, things like that. And so we actually both met working there. And I was actually their like marketing communications person. So I like managed the blog and the social channels. And so I did have that background of kind of building content. Um, and my wife still works at that company in operations and project management. So she worked more on like the actual product side and business side. And I was on the marketing side. So I was always very kind of comfortable of kind of like, I mean, writing and building and launching websites and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of like a natural thing for me to like, because also I think part of it was frustration of, again, at the time, there were some of the like Facebook groups were starting to pop up, but like there wasn't a whole lot of content out there yet. And so, I mean, really, like for a huge part of it, like, we have like this, we bought like a cocktail, like a traditional cocktail book for alcoholic cocktails. And we're just like working our way through, like figuring out like which of these can we try and adapt to non-alcoholic. Cause like we couldn't find many alcohol-free specific recipes online at the time. So we just started making our own, kind of adapting what we could find in traditional cocktail books. And so, yeah, we just figured, I don't know, it was like one of those things we were just interested in doing something, and it was like kind of a fun experiment, at least how it started. We didn't really have necessarily super grand ambitions when we launched. We just figured if we're going to spend the time to work on this, we might as well share it with people.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like resonates with me for sure. I feel like I got into about a year after you, probably right around the same time. Like got into non-alcoholic beer just because I had sort of a reason to stop drinking for a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like take a month off. Um, and then pandemic kind of hit, and then I got served some ad or something, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm gonna try this. And then I had a similar like, oh, this is like you can have this beer, and it's all the awesome things about drinking beer, but none of the alcohol. Long story short, there's a million blogs and like podcasts and things about like the craft beer world, and like you're saying, like finding
hmm
recipes and stuff. And I was kind of like, wow, where do I learn more about this? And
Yeah,
so I'm thankful for you and people like you who started doing it. I feel like it's taking off, but it's still like I don't know what you think, but it feels like it's still in like really early stages. Is that how you are perceiving like the market, or where do you see sort of like the NA market in America, at least like right now?
100%. I think it's still very early. And even like I was emailing with a couple of customers yesterday where we were like their first introduction to non-alcoholic wine, which honestly is like is a very tricky endeavor if we're like the very first one they try, because as much as we believe in our product, like there is especially with the wines, I think like beers and spirits, because they're either being mixed and diluted, or because beers have a much lower alcohol content, and a lot of different ways to kind of play with the flavors. I think I don't want to say it's easy to do, but I would say it's maybe a little bit easier than trying to do like a straight up non-alcoholic red wine. So we're gluttons for punishment there. And so, anyways, it's always fun when I talk to someone who is like the very first introduction. But it happens all the time where people just like, I just like decided this week, like, I need to cut back, or I want to try to cut back, or there's just like so many different, and actually like that was actually the name yours comes from the idea of like, as we started talking to people, like we realized that the reasons, it has nothing to do with like, I think people viewed like, it was always like, oh, like anyone drinking O'Doul's, like they obviously had an alcohol problem and now they're not drinking. And like, it was like very like, honestly, I think in a bad way, they like kind of look down on it. But once you get into it, you realize like there are a million different reasons people choose not to drink. And first of all, it's nobody's business. But second of all, like it's not just, I would say most of the people we talked to, like it was like a lot of people who still drink occasionally, they just wanted to cut out 80% of the habit, which is like that's great. Like, and it's a nice way to keep the routine and the ritual without necessarily feeling like you're missing out. But yeah, it's anyway, the name yours was like, we just landed on this phrase like the choice is yours. Like everyone makes that choice for an individual reason, and that's the way it should be. But yeah, to answer your initial question, I do think that it's still very early. Like people are still, messaging us every week of like, oh, we like just learned that this is like even a thing. And so I'm very optimistic seeing there's like the obvious key players that are really like at the top end driving, I'd say for even the world of wine, like we owe a lot of credit to like Athletic, for what they're doing, and now even like obviously like the investments that like Budweiser has made, and of course like Heineken has put so much effort into Heineken 0.0, and obviously we're like we love exploring the more craft side of things, just as like that's kind of the style we're into when we're drinking non-alcoholic beers. But I think just having those international players putting such time and effort into this like is a very key indication that like we're just at the beginning of what's going to happen. And I even think like I'm sure you've probably come across, there's that water brand Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Do you know them? Yeah. And like which is just like amazing that they like have created, I saw they were just like they were the only water you could buy at Lollapalooza here in Chicago, like, and they're just
Oh
like
wow.
and they're making the idea of like, yeah, like you don't need to have like uh you could have something else besides like that like stupid little crumbly plastic bottle of water. Like you have a cool looking can,
Hey,
tasty water, like you feel like you're fitting in with a guy drinking a Bud Light next to you. And it's just like that the idea of creating experiences where like all are welcome and you don't necessarily have to be drinking, I think is like just getting started. So that's I that's what we hope at least.
yeah. I hope so too. I mean, I feel like that is the ultimate goal. For me, that's why I'm in this world at all. It's like if like we both have been in like the corporate world, like, going to a cocktail party after work
Mm-hmm.
and no one really caring what's in everyone else's drink, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and not having that
Mm-hmm.
tiny little bit of social pressure, like, oh, we're at a work thing. Most like what the budget was spent on is all this beer and wine, and then there's
Yep.
like maybe water over there or something.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I'm right
uh,
there with you.
yeah, and we really believe like I love these, and we've started selling in a couple of them, and it's something we're going to continue to work on. Just like having these conversations at some of these like independent bottle shops across the country that have been popping up, um, and even like some of these sober bars and sober pop-up bars and experiences like that. Like I love all of these things. I think they're very important. They're very exciting. It gives everyone like a safe space to kind of go in and explore this stuff. But in our eyes, I do think that's only half of the equation. I think the other half is yes, you like if you want to find it, you should be able to easily seek it out and find it, and that's great, and have your space. And we think that's like very important. But I also like I want everyone to be able to like, to me, I think it's going to really like we'll know it's working and it's like it's happening if you could walk into like a Buffalo Wild Wings or an Applebee's and like get an Athletic on tap. Like that I think is like once it's integrated into like the traditional restaurant and like grocery experience in this country, I think that'll be like the true sign that like, okay, like this is happening. It's not just like I have to go find it at the local shop, and it's nice that we have one, but it's like I can go anywhere and I can go with my friends to X restaurant or X bar, and I know they're going to have multiple options for me to enjoy. I don't think like the thing is like you should be included everywhere and like have that option everywhere in our opinion. So that's like what we're hoping will eventually reach. And I think we have a long way to go there. Like the for every cool non-alcoholic menu that you see posted in one of these Facebook groups at a bar or restaurant, I would say there's probably 100 that are just like non-alcoholic options, soda,
Yeah.
water. Like that's it, and so that's what we're hoping to see is eventually everyone's like, we at least got some options for those of you that don't want to partake in alcohol.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like wine is even more of an uphill battle. Like, so I live in Indianapolis, Midwest. It's like things get to us last, sort of,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like trends. Um, and I can go to my grocery store and buy athletic, and I can buy honestly a decent amount of like beer, non-alcoholic beer. But there's no way I'm gonna find a non-alcoholic wine,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way I'm gonna find like a NA Spirit or something like that in the
Yeah.
grocery store or even in the
Mm-hmm.
liquor store. Um, there is like some bottle shops and stuff like that. But so what's so this is can be us sort of transitioning into like your guys' wine and your product. Um, what has that been like? Why did you pick wine? It's like I hear your story. I'm like, oh, you started with some NA beer and then you came
Mm-hmm.
out with a wine, which is cool. And yeah, some of the challenges, some of the things that you've seen there, because it from the outside, it feels like wine has a harder time. I was talking to Ian from All the Bitter,
Mm-hmm.
the bitter, and he was in like French, like worked at the French Laundry, was a sommelier. He's like he knows wine, and he was talking to me about like wine is almost what you were saying. There's nothing to hide behind.
Mm-hmm.
It just is what it is. And if you take out the 14% of alcohol, like you can't mask it behind carbonation, or you can't mix it in with a soda. Um. So anyway, it feels like quality, quote unquote, is like harder to get to be at least like blind, what I call like blind taste testable. Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not gonna be able to just close your eyes and not necessarily distinguish. So I don't know if
Correct.
that's why, and I'm just curious your take. Like, do you think that's why I have a harder time finding them unless I like seek it out and buy it online? Or I've asked you like 1,000 questions in one. You can just take whichever one you want. Just use it as
Sure,
the diving board.
sure. Well, actually, yeah, we can. We're very good friends with Ian and Carly. I got bitters right here. And we can talk about that too because we're big believers in um what they're making, and actually have taken non-alcoholic bitters is a great way to um kind of customize non-alcoholic wines to your liking. We actually play around with them quite a bit, even with our own wine, which like we enjoy it. Of course, like we enjoy it straight from the bottle, but sometimes honestly, like during the summer, it's been really hot here. I've been like taking like making like a red wine spritz type thing over ice with a little like soda water and some of their bitters, and like it's a really nice kind of sort of half cocktail, half wine experience. So we can certainly get into that because I think what they're
Yeah,
doing is just incredible. But yeah, I guess it is the easy answer is it's a little bit of all the above. Like I said, it is. I mean, wine to begin with is a very finicky product once you learn how it's made. Which like this was a very big learning experience for us because we did not have a background in winemaking. But we really, back when we were, I guess, like traditional drinkers, my wife and we were pretty, I would say, we personally we almost never drank spirits at home and really out, except like maybe like at a wedding or something. So we were big, like it was beer and wine for us, and really red wine. Like that was kind of our go-to on like a Thursday night, and whatever, we would go sit outside and have a glass of red wine. And so um, as we started exploring the space, we immediately fell in love with many of the beers. I personally took to I love like Belgian style. So as soon as I got my hands on like Syria, and like what Keith Moon has done, or is he's the Blue Moon
yeah, yeah,
former Blue Moon founder.
yeah.
Is his name Keith Moon, or I might be making that up? I think
I
it's
don't think
Keith
his last name is Moon.
Moon.
It's
I may have
it's
made that
something,
up.
but yeah, yeah.
Keith something,
I know who
yeah.
you're talking about. Yep,
Um,
Wisteria beers, and he
yeah, which
made
I
Blue
love.
Moon.
Yeah, love those, and I mean, of course, athletic and untitled art, and
Mm.
just so many different options that we quickly fell in love with. On the spirit side, while we weren't big cocktail drinkers, like we started making these recipes. We're like, oh my god, like these are really good, and so like we immediately fell in love with a variety of spirits. But the wine was where we struggled, and I think like everyone, the many of the sparklings are excellent because sparkling wine traditionally has higher sugar and you have carbonation that adds a lot to the mouth feel and the flavor and the experience. And so those we found some great options there. And we weren't big white wine drinkers to begin with, but we have it occasionally. And again, we found some really great, like Geisen and some other options that we really fell in love with. And of course, Naughty out of the UK. But the red wine was where we struggled, and so that's how we landed on trying to make our own. And we actually started like in our kitchen. We started experimenting with like we were making our own vinegars and like brewing special types of tea, like international tea that we would buy, and like trying to kind of see if we could play around with like different things to get like red wine esque beverages. Some were okay. None of them were very close to resembling like a traditional red wine. And so but like we really just kind of dug our claws into that idea and that like trying to solve that problem. How do we make this better? Because just so like the options out there at the time were just so sugary and it just didn't taste anything like that red wine we knew and loved. And so we eventually, so in geez, I'm like getting my years mixed up, but so 2022 or 2020, excuse me, is like the website took off, community is growing, we started experimenting at home, and then like right at the start of 2021, uh, so 2020 community, 2021, we eventually we started finding some external help, talking to some winemakers, some beverage scientists, mostly in California, because that was really kind of where obviously the wine industry in this country tends to live. Most of it lives there, and so we found some partners eventually that said, we like what you're trying to do, and really for us the difference was is that instead of just like, hey, we're going to take this bulk wine, we're going to take the alcohol out, add back some juice, and call it a day. We went to them. We made a very detailed. I still have it. We wrote like this 5-page brief on like this is what we want in a wine, and like here are all the flavors. Here's like the aromas, like the texture, like and then we even like pulled in like comparisons of like here's 6 different alcoholic wines, like traditional wines that we think like nail certain flavors, because we had been drinking wine for probably 10 years, and so we had our own thoughts on like traditional wines that we enjoyed. And so we built this brief, and then we found some partners that we kind of started to build the flavor profile from the ground up versus just like taking a wine and like seeing how it turns out when you take the alcohol out. And so I think that really allowed us to make something that we believe is very different. And I think that's like probably the biggest response we get on our red blend is that it's very different than what's out there. Which, and like to be fair, I'm not saying 100% of the people enjoy it. Like some people don't like how far like we went away from being kind of the sugary red wine. There are a lot of people that seem to kind of like a little bit more balanced and a little bit sweeter profile, which is fine. Like we're not going to be for everyone. I don't think there's any wine out there that could be like enjoyed by every single person. So, but that was our intention was like, let's see how far we can take it away from what's out there today. And that's, so we started with kind of the end result in mind and then worked backwards to kind of build that flavor profile and working with some, natural flavors and things like that.
That's awesome. I think that your wine, it's funny, yours. The nose on it, like the aroma is for sure the that is blind taste test, blind smell taste testable, whatever the word for that. Like I had my brother in from out of town, drinks a lot of red wine, loves it, and I was drinking like a bottle of yours, and had him. I was like, "Here, try this," and he like as they do, kind of smelled it first,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "Oh, this smells really good." And then he was like, he tasted it, and he was just sort of like, what is this? And then I told him what it was, and then by the time, like, by the end of the night, like, he had like 2 or 3 glasses, like, he loved
Really?
it. Yeah,
That's
so it was,
great.
like, really cool. Um,
That's awesome.
it is, like, you almost have to, and Ian and I talked about this a little bit with, like, the spirit world, like, you get a whiskey, and you get a thing of NA whiskey, and you pour them into a glass and you drink them, like, the NA whiskey is disgusting, like, that
Hmm.
you're gonna throw it away, but
Hmm.
the education piece that, honestly, I didn't even know of is, like, that it wasn't designed to be drank that way. It's like, mix it in with this and make an awesome cocktail and then try them both side by side,
Hmm.
and they taste pretty similar. So, there's a little bit of, like, so we can get into the bitter stuff too. We didn't talk about that with Ian, and I've heard of that, or I've heard of, like, vinegar, or, like, things that people do to kind of
Hmm.
tweak your drinks. But what I guess my I've got 2 questions. So one, do you think there's, like, a mind shift that we need to have around non-alcoholic wine, and just, like, think of it as, like, sort of a different category of drink,
Hmm.
and so we can sort of compare them that way instead of kinda comparing it to traditional wines all the time? And then
Uh,
2, like, do you think we will eventually, with the science or the art or whatever, like, get to that point where we're gonna get indistinguishable sort of, like, wines and NA wines?
yeah, that's a really good question. So the first part, yeah, I do think there needs to be a shift. I, the human brain is an interesting thing, and I think in the beverage world, it really you kind of see some of like the weird quirks that we have as humans. And for example, like there are countless studies where they have done they've swapped labels on like traditional wine bottles where it's like, oh, you're drinking a $500 bottle of wine, but it was like a $4 bottle they took from the bottom rack. And because of what they were told, how people explained the wine, they gave the same sort of pitch that they would give at like the fine tasting room, the bottle it came in, the weight of the glass they use, all those things. People drink that and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And it's so much about the taste is tied up in like what you think about it mentally and like the it kind of going back to like for people, I'm sure you've heard this too, of like the common refrain is what's the point when it comes to non-alcoholic stuff. But my argument is always like, I mean, for most people, as I understand it, alcohol takes at least 15 minutes to start like metabolizing into your bloodstream. And what's your favorite sip of a beverage? Like for me, and I think for most people, it's like you've had a long week, it's Friday evening, you pour that glass of wine, and like that very first sip, you're like, oh, and the thing about that experience, like that's the best sip. You're just like, you feel so good. You're finally kind of switching into relaxation mode. The alcohol is not even close to hitting you yet. And so it has that sip and that experience has nothing to do with the alcohol content. Because it has no effect on your body yet. And so I think like once you explain that to people, they're like, okay, like I see what you're saying. And
That's a really good
it,
point. I've actually never heard anybody say that, but that is such a good,
yeah, it's the
it's
and
the
I would
whole
make the case
psychological
like
thing.
exactly. Yeah. Like no one cares about their 40th sip on their third glass. It's that first one. And it is all like that psychological thing. And I actually just read recently, which I earmarked because I think it is very relevant for our industry too. Talk about how when they started bringing Red Bull to the United States, it'd been big in Asia for decades, and then they decided they were going to start exporting it. They did these taste tests, and like across the board, people in the US were saying like this is the worst thing I've ever put in my mouth. It is
Yeah.
disgusting. And now Red Bull is like the biggest energy drink company and even like I mean I think like probably after just traditional Coke, like one of the best selling beverages in the
Yeah.
US
Yeah.
because it's not about taste is just one element. It's about like
Mm.
how you think you're going to feel and like that perk you're going to get and whether or not that's actually truly chemical or not. It's just like they've done such a good job marketing the product and now in your brain it's like okay this taste equates to a feeling I'm going to get and like this energy I need to get through my day. And so I totally agree. I think it is a mental shift that people need to have and that's why like we do a lot of educating with these first time buyers of non-alcoholic wine of like you know whether or not we eventually get to the point where like you could do a blind taste test. I honestly don't know. it's going to be hard because especially with wine, going back to the earlier part about like there's nowhere to hide. And alcohol, I mean, it's a very aggressive chemical. And it carries so much flavor and aroma and mouthfeel. Like it does so much to you, and obviously it does a lot of things that are not good or healthy for you, but replicating that is obviously proving to be challenging. I read recently, I haven't heard much about it, but there was like some scientists in Europe that like created artificial alcohol where it had like the same chemical components, but didn't actually have like an effect on you. It doesn't create or increase blood alcohol level, which like, so that was interesting. I didn't read
Yeah.
up too much on it, but like,
Yeah.
I do think like you would need something like that. Um, there's just nothing that exists that I'm aware of, or really that like the partners we work with, the winemakers are aware of that can recreate that aggressiveness. And when you're talking about a traditional bottle of wine as 13, 14% of this very aggressive substance, when you take that out, like, you're going to be, it's going to be lacking, or it's going to be not lacking. That's a bad choice. It's going to be different. And so we tried to kind of put back in and play around with the flavors as much as we could to create that experience. But I don't know, to be perfectly honest, if it'll ever be like a blind taste testing. And I think that's okay,
Yeah.
honestly. I think if once you start to recalibrate, that's what we tell everyone to, and aside from wine, like spirits, beers, whatever it is, like just like try and like commit to, if you're gonna do this, like yeah, try it for like 2 weeks. Like just like see if you can go 2 weeks swapping in, and then I guarantee by the end of that second week, you're like, okay. It's like when you go from Coke to Diet Coke, and at first you're like, oh, it's like really bitter, and like I don't know, it's not, I'm not really liking it. And then a week later, you're like, you have a regular Coke, like, oh my god, this is way too sweet. And like you just need a little bit of time to recalibrate what you're used to. So
Yeah.
we're like very optimistic. I do think there'll be advancements in like the way this stuff is manufactured that'll really help with that. And so hopefully that in conjunction with like people just kind of educating themselves and learning, will help us get there.
Yeah. I love what you were saying too about just like with every I don't think it's always in the forefront of our minds, but I think subconsciously with everything we are consuming, we care. Taste is just one thing on the list, you know? And I don't think I think that way, like consciously. I'm like, this
Hmm.
tastes good. I like it. But I love coffee. And obviously, I love the taste of it, but I love the effects it has on me too. Not even just
Hmm.
like it makes me more awake, but it's like, it's relaxing. It feels so cozy. It's like
Hmm.
the warmth of it. Um, and so I do think maybe even like getting our minds more holistic around the drinking experience and not just does this taste like I'm expecting it to taste, but like how do I feel? How do I feel now? How do am I
Hmm.
going to feel in the morning if I drink this whole bottle? Like
Yep.
it won't matter. So I think
Yeah.
that's a really cool like I was going to ask if and we can wrap up here shortly with people who come to you and they're like, okay, 9 o'clock wine. Like you're saying, what's the point? Or I with wine specifically, I hear all the time, like, isn't that just grape juice? You know?
Yeah.
For people not watching the
Yeah.
video, we got a big major eye roll here. I assume is a
Yeah,
normal
we hear.
question for you.
Yep.
So like
Yep.
what's your I don't know, maybe not pitch on why try it, but sort of like what's your advice to somebody who's like, okay, I love wine and maybe I don't want to drink this month for this reason, or I'm pregnant, or all the reasons,
Hmm.
all the choices yours, as you're saying. Like, sort of, what's your 101 on here's non-alcoholic wine, here's how to try it, and then also if you want to sprinkle in some of the like tips that you have on adding things, and you said your spritz, like that sounds really cool. I
Hmm.
kind of want to try that. Like, I'd just love to hear anything about that.
Sure. So the first part on like why you should try it, I mean, I won't even get into because I think everyone, I would imagine by the time they make it to this podcast, they're already kind of thinking about or like they've developed those reasons of why they think they should go alcohol free. And again, like everyone, whatever reason you have, it's the right reason. Like whatever you choose, whatever makes you go this route, I think it's an excellent one. And like for us here too, like we're big on like we don't, of course, ask our customers this, but just anecdotally talking to some of them, I think we probably have just as many people that still drink alcohol occasionally. It's just a matter of like they want to cut back versus those that don't drink at all. And we welcome any type of person, even if you're just swapping a few days a week. Like we're happy to have you in our community. But um, I think it's really a matter of like when you're going to make this decision, just like really think about what you're trying to replace. And I think it goes back to like that first sip of wine and think about how wine makes you feel, traditional wine, and when you tend to have it. And it's, I would imagine for most people, it's like, I had a stressful day, I get home or I'm working from home and like shut off the computer, like take care of all my obligations around the house, this, and then like I finally like I pull out that bottle and I pour that glass, and it's just like it's a moment for me, like you know what I mean. And I think that's a lot of people use alcohol in that way of like it's like a switch you flip of okay, like now it's my time, and like I'm gonna slip into a little bit of relaxation after just like a crazy hectic day. And obviously we've lived through years of just, and I think people have had a lifetime of stress in 2 year span. So think about what you're really trying to get from that, and then realize that it's it's not the core component of that is not the compound of alcohol. It's the taking a moment for yourself. It's carving out that 10 minutes on your patio or wherever you go or your kitchen counter, whatever it is. It's more about the ritual. And I think that's really what we can offer, and all the companies in the industry can offer is like we can keep that ritual exactly the same. And I think it's important actually, kind of to go to the point, I think it's important that you keep it that way of like, and that's why we work so hard, like why we wanted the 750 milliliter glass bottle and to still have a cork and the foil. And like, so you got to get out the corkscrew. And like, we recommend like, if you're transitioning, this kind of your first foray, like get out your favorite wine glass and like really keep that same ritual of like everything you do. And same with like, if you're a big beer drinker and you always love like pouring stuff into a pint glass, like when you get a non-alcoholic beer, like yeah, pull out the pint glass, like chill it the same way, like keep all the other elements the same, do it in the same time, same spot, and just replace the beverage. And I think you'll be amazed um, at it might take a couple days to recalibrate the taste component, but if you keep everything else the same, I think you'd be really, really be surprised at like how quickly you start to adapt and get that same feeling, that same switch of okay, this is still my time. You just don't have the effects of alcohol, and then you start to get the added benefit of like how you feel the next morning, which I think is something people don't think about right away. But that's really what you get the moment in the evening, and then you get this amazing morning when you didn't consume alcohol. So it's kind of a two for one. So that's what we recommend is like just try to keep everything as much as you can, keep the ritual the same way, and we believe that's kind of the best way to try and start to swap this in. And then as far as like making it your own when it comes to our wine, like of course we believe in enjoying it straight from the bottle, but like all wines, like we tend to let it breathe a little bit. And if you have an aerator, definitely, I think that helps a lot. Some people, if you do find like with our wine, obviously we really pushed it to try and be kind of on the dry side, non-sweet. But if you think it's like a little bit too far, if you chill it a little bit and put it in the fridge for 20 minutes before you drink it, when it's a little bit cooler, that kind of edge, if whatever you want to call it, it gets dialed back a little bit. We found it gets a little muted once it's chilled. So some of our customers really like to chill the wine before they drink it. And then yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different things you can do in terms of sangrias and cocktails and bitters. I'd say we're big fans of so they all the bitter, as you know, has three varieties. With the red wines, the orange doesn't work. We haven't found the orange to work very well with the red wines. So we're big on like they have the New Orleans and then just the aromatic. And just start like take a dropper full and put it in. Take a couple. Like you can't. It's a glass of wine. You're not gonna hurt it. Like just experiment. And there's really interesting flavors in here that you can pull out. And then I actually take to a lot of times, especially when it's hot outside. Like I said, splash, pour it over ice, splash of soda water. And if you go to our website, sip yours, sipyours.com, we have various recipes using our red blend, and different things you can try out just to get more mileage out of the bottle, if you will.
That's awesome. Um, Kelly, this was so fun. Thank you for doing this and for chatting. And we are geographically not that far away from each other, so maybe next time we can meet up and do another episode in person or something.
I would love that. I think actually I have been to Indianapolis, and I think it is a very underrated city. It's a very like it's one of those excellent. America has like these excellent mid-tier cities. Like your Cleveland's. I think Indianapolis is up there too. It's a very fun place.
Totally. I always call it like the America's smallest big city. It's like it feels like a small town, but it's got all the cool stuff. It's got like the
Hmm.
sports teams and the restaurants, and I will give a plug to anybody who's here. I'm pretty sure there's a alcohol-free bottle shop opening in Carmel like tomorrow, and it's the first one I know
Oh,
of in Indianapolis. So that's pretty cool.
cool.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
So you gotta. I don't know if they're stocking yours yet or not, but hopefully get them on the shelves there too.
Awesome. Yeah,
Um,
we'll definitely reach out.
yeah. So the I guess you kind of you told people where to find you. I'd love to know just as sort of parting, like what's next for you guys? Any big plans? Anything we should be looking out for other than you have a 3-month-old baby and you're trying to get some sleep?
Yes, that the sleep thing is priority one. Yeah, you can find us online at our website, sipyours.com. And then actually we just started going back to talking about Ian and Carly, we actually just started selling bundles on our website where you can buy the wine and some bitters
Oh, cool.
in kind of one shot. So then you can experiment, and we'll send you some recipes. So if you feel like giving that a go, you can find those bundles on our website as well. We are we do have some stuff in the pipeline. We're very excited. Hopefully next month we'll have some news to share. Nothing I can quite divulge yet, but hopefully by the end of this year, the red blend won't be the only thing you'll find on our storefront. So we got some fun things in the process, and are just really excited to continue exploring. And we every single day we're just trying to think about how to make this better for people. So for those that are longtime non-alcoholic drinkers, we've got plenty coming, and for all the new folks that are joining the movement, we're excited to have you here.
That's awesome. That's the exact teaser that I need. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm so excited to find out. So, um, okay, cool. Thank you so much, Kelly. This was awesome. And I will put all the links to all the places people can find your wines everywhere we post this, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, would love to. Thank you so much, Logan.